Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading White Women Get Ready, how healing post-traumatic mistress syndrome leads to anti-racist change. This is a book that I have been reading a little bit at a time for my own process of deconstructing the delusion of white supremacy, and if you are interested in following along, you can get copies here as well. Moving beyond whiteness. There is much about our legacies not to love. But what then are the parts we can? One resource that has been helpful for me to begin moving toward a more solutionary approach is a document by Kenneth Jones and Tima Okun titled White Supremacy Culture. In the original document, they identify culture as powerful precisely because it is so present and at the same time so very difficult to name or identify. To make the often invisibilized culture of white supremacy visible, they chronicle 13 main characteristics with detailed descriptions of how these characteristics show up in workplace settings. Since this document first came out, Okun has re-envisioned the work into a vibrant multimedia website that embraces the feeling and spirit of moving toward collective liberation. What I've appreciated about the document and website is that in addition to identifying white supremacy culture, they also offer concrete antidotes. These antidotes, like understand that discomfort is at the root of all growth and learning, to address entitlement to comfort, and separate the person from the mistake as an antidote for perfectionism, likewise encourage us to identify elements from our own cultural traditions that already support divorcing white supremacy culture. This both-and approach doesn't bypass the harm, and it doesn't forfeit our imaginations for whom we could become. This solutions-based approach is an invitation to hold the imperfections of our cultural legacies alongside their values. Given the violence of our oppressive histories and our collusion with white supremacy, what from our traditions and histories or their stories are worth holding on to? What about them are worth fighting for? Which parts hold nutrition and which parts are poisonous? Which are the rhubarb stalks and which are the leaves? The path toward healing from mistress syndrome includes taking what we need and composting the rest. I consider Alice Walker's words often. Take what you can use and let the rest rot. Also, Biss's, whiteness is not who you are, which is why it is entirely possible to despise whiteness without disliking yourself. Despising whiteness is not the hard part, though liking ourselves may be. Who am I beyond whiteness? Who are you? Culturally, spiritually, who are we? What from our traditions do we want to reclaim? Which narratives need to be restoried? Which ingredients are worth remembering? Which seeds do we want to save? Reclaiming. Growing up, Sunday morning church service was an integral part of my family's routine. We went every week. Rare exceptions were made for travel, or, as I got older, soccer tournaments. But definitely not for the day after birthday party sleepovers or for catching up on homework. When I was in middle school, one of the church ladies put up a quilt frame in the back of the sanctuary. From then on, while the mostly men were at the pulpit, the mostly women were humming away at the quilt frame, listening or not listening to the sermon, agreeing, disagreeing with what was preached. As I became more uncomfortable with what I was hearing from the pulpit, I started to think of the busy quilters in the back of the sanctuary as the subversive Sunday sewing circle. These were Mennonite women undermining patriarchal sermons with practical, comforting, communal life nourishing acts. Here they were maintaining the fiber arts traditions that are some of humanity's oldest technology. The quilt tops that appeared at the back of my home congregation's sanctuary were intended to be auctioned at the Mennonite relief sale. These quilts were not just works of art. They would provide food and services, and possibly some dry latrines, for people all over the world. These quilts were practical. These quilts supported life. It was nice that the sermons would still be preached and the scriptures continued to be read. But sermon or no sermon, a quilter's work must go on. Of course, like my queering of Aunt Amanda, this is a perspicuous projection on my part. I doubt the Quilters' intent was to undermine a status quo in which all eyes, ears, hearts, and minds were supposed to be fixated on the white cis male speaker by organizing a collaborative sewing circle in the back of the sanctuary. But also, maybe it was. However, the impact, at least on me, was the slightest waft of subversion. Wafts of subversion have been existing even within the innermost chambers of the wicked webs. Where then is our potential for subversion from within? What are the liberatory threads awaiting our reclamation? Where are the Quilters in your lineages, quietly subverting as they get on with nurturing life?